With the FBI not turning over that information, what do you think the impacts could be to companies looking at whether they should move or not on their 2020 DEI promises? I'm Britni Eisenmann with GenElevate. We work to remove employee engagement barriers, and today I'm talking to...
Hi, everyone. I'm Alysha M. Campbell. I am the founder and principal at CultureShift HR.
All right. I would like to talk starting at the big national level and then take the conversation all the way down to what an individual supervisor with a small team can do as far as DEI and what the impacts are of that.
Absolutely.
Yes. So let's start at the big level. This weekend, we learned from the chairman of the House Committee for Homeland Security, U.S. Rep. Benny Thompson, that in mid-2020, the Congress passed a bill, and part of that was asking the FBI to release what they had as far as domestic security threats, domestic terrorism. And as of this past weekend, we are 6 months past that due date.
Wow.
Yes. So with the FBI not turning over that information, what do you think the impacts could be to companies looking at whether they should move or not on their 2020 DEI promises?
I think it's really disappointing to see that, with everything going on, the fundamental mandate that they've kind of set out to initialize and really activate has kind of fallen short. And it really does a disservice to all the members in the community who are actively fighting and who are actively speaking about, racism and discrimination and all the different hateful things that are happening towards the Black community. And I think that we really need to start looking at how are we servicing our communities at all levels. How are we making sure that we have the right resources? How do we make sure that we're putting the work toward the right actions that are really going to start to drive the results? And through this information not being available, I think we don't have the full picture. We don't know what's going on. We don't know about the other elements that we don't see or hear about every day. And when, everyday people are hearing what's going on and there's less of kind of the actions that are happening behind whatever government is doing at all levels and how things are happening in our communities, we aren't getting that like immediate information that we need to then adjust or pivot our actions to make sure we get the outcomes that we're looking for. And so we're relying on, our governments and our different levels of institution to really give us that insight and provide us that knowledge and that feedback. And without that feedback loop, we're kind of lost in the dark. So I'm really hoping we can turn this around and get a little bit more of a faster cadence on information like this, because it is so pivotal when we're trying to make change and when we're trying to do the right thing and really try to reverse decades of a lot of the disservice to the Black communities in the States. And so I'm really hoping that we can turn this around.
If I'm the HR director for a global organization that's located in the US, and I'm looking to make good on some of the promises that we've made in 2020, do you believe in today's environment, how much weight should I put on what the federal government is saying and releasing?
I would say it's very important what is being said, but at the end of the day, you've decided for you and your team and you and your organization to have a mandate to facilitate a culture of belonging, acceptance, inclusion, and diversity. And so no matter what, what is coming out of the government from a reporting perspective, it's important that you follow through on that mandate and on the actions that you said that you were going to take. So create an action plan, create a roadmap of where you are today and where you want your team to be, and start to identify those action items that are going to get you there. Maybe it's looking at your recruiting processes and your hiring structure. Maybe it's looking at your the language that you use and making sure that it's non-gender related, making sure that you are looking at systems and programs that help facilitate diversity within the organization and not block it away. So I think if you've dedicated, time and resources to ensuring that you've wanted to create a diverse and inclusive culture, continue on that road. Do not stray and continue to push forward with what you've identified as what you want to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking to that end goal that you're talking about and you're making the action steps to get there, how should we think about that end goal? How do we inform ourselves about what that end goal should be? And should that be, a static goal, or should we expect it to move?
Great question. I think, well, first identifying the goal, you have to kind of look to see what's within your means. When I talk to a lot of my clients about diversity and inclusion, it's very overwhelming for them because they think they have to boil the whole ocean and they need to, transform everything overnight within a short period of time. And they put a lot more heaviness on themselves than necessary. Because remember, we are doing a good thing here. We are making positive, wonderful reinforcement changes. But with any change, it takes time, and it's not a flip of a switch where these changes can happen, but you're literally changing the behaviors and mindsets of people, which takes time. So I would say, look at what you have on your roadmap today or on your project map today, and really identify to say, okay, based on our time commitment, based on running the business, based on what we need to do, what is realistic? Because we want to make sure that whatever that end goal is, that it's successful, because you don't want to work all year and then you don't even come close to hitting the goal.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you're hitting it, of course, but if not, coming really, really close to, ticking that off the to-do list. So I would say, look to see what you can do, and then don't think so big, like really think granular, like what are the things that can affect positive change today? So if I want to create a diversity and inclusion committee to ensure that every month we're reading a new book or listening to a new podcast on diversity and inclusion, that's awesome. You're educating your staff on all these amazing topics. That's an incredible action item. So that's something that you can do, you can organize and probably get underway within a couple of short weeks. Add that to the list. Maybe the third thing is making sure that your employees have access to hiring training, so that anybody that's recruiting and hiring knows how to ask the right questions, knows how to use an interview assessment candidate scorecard, so that there's no bias in the process. You could probably look to find a facilitator or create a program, again, probably within a short 6 to 8 weeks. So those two things alone, without even diving deeper into other areas of the business, they seem small, but the impact is massive. And then as you continue to evolve and as you continue to work on the small things that you can start to affect change, the change is going to really permeate between where you are and where you want to be in all areas of the organization and the business. And you're really going to see a culture shift within the organization as you start to think of things and see things with a different lens than you do today. And then as you start to get towards that goal, and you say you get to the halfway point, you're in June, and you're like, you know what, that goal with the other commitments we have going on and with vacations and all these other things, maybe we need to adjust that goal. Maybe that goal, it needs to be for Q1 of 2022, but for the end of this year, this is what we know we can accomplish based on the way that the business is moving and changing. So constantly checking in with yourself, your team, your goals, your action items on a quarterly basis is going to be so key to make sure that you're identifying the right things based on what's going on right now and making sure that you're setting yourself up for success to hit that goal.
One of the key factors in my work at GenElevate with employee engagement is that even if you set up all of these systems and you do all the things right, if the employee doesn't feel appreciated and doesn't feel like you're trying to walk toward them and help them engage with their work and their company, then it's almost all for naught. Do you see the same thing with DEI work?
Absolutely. What's really critical about DEI work is that everyone has their own, I would say, meaning behind that phrase. And what diversity and inclusion means to me may mean something different to you, Britni, and that's okay. That's what makes us so unique and what makes this topic and really this avenue within I would say HR or in the people team or really within an organization so fundamental and so special, because it can have varying definitions and importance to everybody. I would say as with any initiative, you're not going to be able to please everybody, because everybody, again, has their own perspective and has their own way of looking at things. But what I would say is make it centered, focused on the employee always. No matter what initiatives you're really doing, always have the employee at the center of it. What experience are they going to get out of this? What is the outcome? What is going to be their takeaways from whatever activity or initiative or project that we're going to be rolling out? And if it fosters inclusion, if it helps, people feel that they belong, if it expands the diversity within your teams, if it gives people a voice, if it gives people a lens of advocacy and allyship, then no matter where I stand on diversity and inclusion and where somebody else stands, we can all agree that those are fundamental elements of any organizational culture. So even if I'm wanting to make sure that we are creating a learning and development agenda around, the anti-Black racism movement, and where somebody else may want to focus on LGBTQ plus, information and prospects. We can do both. There's tons of intersectionality that happens with a lot of these different, minority groups, and we want to make sure that we're making everybody feel included. So let's include and talk about as many topics as we can. Let's talk about and do as many, educational things that we can, and include them in our roadmap to make sure that no one feels excluded, but at the same time shining the light on the areas that do need the most attention and that do need the most time and energy behind it, to make sure that we're putting our efforts towards the right place.
Mm-hmm. Some of these topics that feel so big, like you said, boiling the ocean, they can get stuck in committee. And some of that is having different definitions and thereby understanding the goal differently. Do you think it's important to set a definition for your company as far as what DEI means, or is it okay to leave it a little malleable for different interpretations?
I think it's important that there's some definition, but I would keep the definition malleable. And what I mean by that is, at the baseline, diversity and inclusion in and of itself is a definition. Like there is, you look it up in the dictionary, there are words that define what diversity means, what inclusion means, and what you're trying to create as a culture. But what I would say is where the malleability comes in is really understanding what is going to be your focus and priority with the committee, or with, the group who's responsible for this, or the group that's going to action this and really rally behind it, is really identifying the focus areas. So for example, if you really want to make sure that you're not just, that you're being as inclusive as possible and talking on and about as many topics as possible, create a schedule, create an agenda to make sure that you're not just focusing too much attention on one element and not on another. And then as well as make sure that you're engaging the right employees for the right topics and for the right initiatives that you're looking to execute, because that's going to be important as well. Because when we get to Pride Month and we're not speaking to any of our LGBTQ plus employees on how they want to celebrate Pride and acknowledge it within the organization, we're missing a massive gap there. So we want to make sure that we're including the right stakeholders, we're including the right employees, and then also to make sure that things don't get stuck in council, that we have an ELT or like a senior leadership member being an advocate for the group, so that if things get stuck with budget or timelines, they're able to speak to the right people, get things moving, and making sure that things don't stay stuck for too long of a period. So that could be really, really helpful to make sure that, the team feels empowered and feels activated to do the right things in the right time.
Okay. Do you have tips for how a company should go about picking that leader for each diversity factor within their company?
Great question. I would say it doesn't necessarily come down to the leader identifying what factor they want to support. I think it needs to be a collaborative effort. Like, I think it needs to be something that's meaningful to that person, because they are spending their time, they are spending their energy, and so we want to make sure that we're always giving back to the people who help us and help to move forward any initiatives that we're doing. And then two, I would say what does the team really need? So for example, if it's a new diversity and inclusion council, and they need to get organized and they need to figure out a structure and figure out a plan for the team themselves, maybe it's someone that is familiar with building out teams, and someone who's done that before and knows how to get the team organized and structured and ready. Whereas someone who is more strategic, who knows how to plan and strategize, although that skill set is very well needed, that might be more better for a diversity and inclusion committee that's maybe a bit more mature, to actually be able to utilize and take advantage of that type of skill set. But I would say, that aside, it's really important that both all the members of the council and the person that's supporting them really do get along. They see that they understand the mandate, and they are on the same page on what they want to move forward and how.
Okay. I love that you brought out they need to get along, because so much can get stuck when we're frustrated, like especially when it's a topic that all of us have big opinions and frameworks around. If we can't get along on these committees to move things forward, nothing's going to happen.
Exactly. No, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Let's say I am the HR manager for a small company. We are in a hiring freeze. I'm expecting it to last at least 6 months. What are some aspects of DEI that I can use this, a little bit of breathing room that I have to drive deep these concepts and beliefs in the existing workforce that I have?
Yes. I would say the first step, especially being, a solo HR manager, it can feel overwhelming, absolutely, because amongst everything else that you have to do, you're now taking on, the massive theme of diversity and inclusion. I would say the first thing, and this is where I tell anyone that I speak to when they want to, start to roll the ball with the DEI is really around education and learning and development. It is so important that you are educating your team and first and foremost yourself, and being able to create a space of learning and development on this topic. This topic goes so deep and so wide and so many different areas and facets that people have doctorates in diversity and inclusion. So it's important that we understand, okay, what is it that we're really trying to learn? What is the cornerstone of diversity and inclusion? Why are cultures not inclusive? Why are they not diverse? What is stopping diversity from getting through the door? And starting at those very fundamental questions and allowing that to kind of lead your learning and development journey within the space, I think is really great. Because if you have those questions, very likely your staff have those questions as well, and want to know from a trusted source kind of how this all kind of came about and what they can do to action things, and get the ball rolling. So I would say that would be the first step. And then number two would be kind of creating, like you said, that D&I council of a small group of people, maybe 5 to 7 individuals who really have a passion and really have an intuition on how they want to see diversity and inclusion come alive within the organization. And then having, yourself as the HR manager really lean in and help them kind of make sure they're staying organized, staying structured, and being able to make that, long lasting contribution back to the organization, whether it be through program activation, learning and development, or different trainings that the team and the council kind of recommend and suggest. So I think that would be, a really good place to start. It seems simple, but there's a lot of work that goes into, training sessions and learning and development, lunch and learns, and really understanding where to start. So although it may not seem a lot in terms of tasks and projects, those two things could be fundamentally changing for an organization to start the ball rolling on creating a more diverse and inclusive culture.
Okay.
Mhm.
I think the nitty gritty of work getting done can so often come down to the frontline supervisors.
Mm.
So those supervisors who their direct reports are doing the actual work that everybody else has planned and made action steps for.
Mhm.
So if I'm a supervisor of a small frontline worker team, what should I think about as far as moving my team from learning about DEI to putting in actions and habits so that our team is inclusive without having to think about it?
What I've seen be really successful is starting to tie in the DEI goals into performance management structures.
Mhm.
So, how are you making sure that you're being an ally? How are you making sure that you are being an advocate? Maybe it's leading a D&I session, a training, recommending a book, contributing to the council. Maybe it's about, looking at our hiring processes or looking at our different client management processes to see, is there bias coming in? How can we make sure that we're dealing with clients who are minority owned businesses or women owned businesses and getting those as part of the makeup of our organization? How can we make sure that we're asking our employees the right questions during performance review time to make sure that we're looking at the work that's actually being done, versus other outcomes of usual processes like that? So I think tying it back in to keep that accountability visible and high is going to be really key. And mind you, that is not something that happens overnight. I would say that is more of a phase two, as a organizational culture that is, on their D&I journey. Because
Mhm.
if you start to make all these goals and say, well, now I'm going to hold you accountable, it's going to be a part of your performance management assessment, like that's very overwhelming. But I would say as you have started to, do your diversity and inclusion activities, you have your roadmap, you have your council, and a senior leadership sponsor, you have a calendar of activities or learning and development and trainings, then you can start to see, okay, like how can we make this now more personal and more part of the employee experience? So tying it back to performance management and that performance review time and making it a goal and a metric that they want to work towards and start to, identify with that helps them in their own learning journey, I think is a great way to integrate that properly.
Okay.
Mhm.
Here's a question I'm dying to find out what your answer is, or if there is one answer to this.
Mhm.
How do I avoid being performative?
Performative. And please enlighten me a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Okay. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So I'm working with an organization that is, what's the best way to say this? Everybody essentially works in person. They don't have a lot of remote employees.
Okay.
So their pool of employees is from one rural, overly white area.
Mhm.
And so I was working with them, and part of it was to make sure that their training materials and the onboarding reflect what their employees can do and are doing, including people with diverse backgrounds, what they're doing, and bringing that forward.
Mhm.
So focusing on not just you need 3 Black people or 3 Latinas in this picture,
Mhm.
more, okay, with this policy, when we explain it, is there somebody that you have that's really good at that? Things like that, and bringing it forward. And the company came back to me and asked, doesn't this look performative if we are just
Mm.
diversifying the videos and photos and the speakers that we're bringing in for onboarding? And it took me a while to think through this. And my response was, which this may be right or wrong, I want your input, was
Mhm.
that it's not performative if you are showing employees explaining what they do in their work and doing it well.
Mhm.
It's not just placing in a brown face there.
Yeah.
It's an employee showing what they do well. So the company wanted to know, how do I avoid, or how do we avoid being performative or looking like we're just being performative?
Got you. Okay. Oh, that's an awesome question. I think I actually really align well to your explanation in terms of let's demonstrate the people who are doing the work well. But I think to expand on that, I think it's what's the intentionality behind the action. So, for example, some of my clients, one of the questions I get is, well, if I just, to feed off of your example, I hire 3, Black people to my organization in this team. Doesn't that just look like tokenism?
Mhm.
And in the beginning, yes, that's what, if you look at the definition of tokenism and you look at the action that you're taking, that's what it looks like. You're intentionally increasing the diversity within your organization, and you're hiring specifically from different ethnic groups and different marginalized communities within your organization. However, it all depends on how you start to shape and create that culture of belonging. So for example, if I start to hire, a more diverse workforce, or I'm starting to include different diverse policies and mechanisms within the organization, but I can't make my employees feel like they belong. I don't have, a resource group for them. I don't have materials for them to read up. I don't have any, even celebration of different ethnic holidays and information for them to feel like they can understand and appreciate all that's going on and within our organizational culture, then yes, it is performative and it is essentially tokenism. But when you're trying to intentionally create a culture where no matter where anybody comes from, they feel like they belong, they have the resources to feel supported, and they have an avenue within the organization that they can raise any issues or concerns without feeling reprimanded after, and they're able to really feel like they can thrive and be their authentic selves within the organization, then no, that's not the case at all. You're really starting to build that culture of belonging and trueness to employees where, it's going to attract and be able to sustain the diversity that you're trying to create. And through that, create and increase the knowledge of your current employees on why diversity and inclusion and equity is so important, and how we need to make space and we need to make room for these things. And we need to be intentional because we have our own biases that play into our day-to-day actions and decisions. That's why it's called unconscious bias. We don't even realize at times that we're even doing it or that it's even happening. So we have to be very intentional and very vivid on why we're doing what we're doing. And it may seem like we're just acting just to act, but it's the follow through of what really counts and really shows the true intention of your actions behind your diversity and inclusion efforts.
Mhm. Okay, so even if a new employee might feel like, this looks like tokenism, their
Mhm.
experience will indicate otherwise if you're engaging in more than just tokenism, if you're taking this
Exactly.
seriously. Okay,
100%.
okay. All right. Anything
Yeah.
else that a new leader or a young leader should think about as far as DEI and their leadership?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, get the help you need. As a leader, there's that pressure again to feel like you know it all or that you know how to do everything and that, it has to all rest on your shoulders. But please seek the expertise that you need. Again, DEI is a very deep and a very wide topic, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed and to kind of get lost in all its little nooks and crannies. So get the expertise that you need, hire a consultant, an advisor, someone to help you along the journey, because that will make sure that you're not duplicating efforts and we'll make sure that you're doing it right the first time. Because again, it's all about that employee experience. So if you try this and it doesn't land well, your employees are going to remember that more than when things do go right. So it's important that with something especially so sensitive, it can be again very triggering to some employees and have a lot of meaning to employees within your organization. Having a subject matter expert to help lead and navigate that landscape is going to be so key, and you'll be very grateful for it afterwards.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you for this conversation today. We learned a
Yeah.
lot from federal level all the way down to a new young supervisor.
Absolutely.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, definitely. So I am on all social media platforms. My name is Alysha M. Campbell. So that's Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can also check out my site, cultureshifthr.com, or my personal site, alyshacampbell.com as well.
All right. Thanks, Alysha. I appreciate it.
No worries. Bye.